everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast. We're finally back together. All three members have somehow managed to make it to this recording, which we are very happy about. Scott and Joris and myself will be going through everything from this week. Guys, how are you doing this evening? You happy that we're all back together again? The world seems a bit more normal, maybe. I don't know.
Well, it's a big hello from the full trident again, which is a lovely thing to be able to say. Hello, guys. Hello, listeners. What a week it's been in Belgian football. So much to chew over. Some really big news last night, of course, as well, and over the last couple of days. Looking forward to this one.
Yep, and December has begun.
It has, Christmas season. The festive spirit, not much festive spirit going around for a couple of people, as Scott mentioned. I think, kind of looking ahead to this episode, I was thinking we could actually probably not talk about any football and still fill the whole hour talking about the Belgian football. Like, just we could talk about all the off-field stuff for a good hour easily. But as is custom, we will actually talk about the football as well, as I'm sure listeners do want to know about kind of our opinions on the games and stuff like that. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they're sick of our opinions on the games, but you're still here listening, so yeah, you must like it. Let's quickly go through the scores from round 16. Kortrijk beat Mechelen 3-1. Club Brugge beat Deinze 4-1 at home. Charleroi drew 1-1 with Standard Liège. Sint-Truiden drew 2-2 with Genk. Beerschot won 3-2 against Cercle Bruges, which, as Scott's mentioned, had some ramifications. The new man was in the stadium for Leuven, drawing 0-0 with Anderlecht. Union beat Antwerp 2-1. They had a really good week, actually. We'll definitely touch on some of their stuff. And Westerlo and Ghent drew 2 goals apiece. Let's first go to that Kortrijk-Mechelen game. And I think, before kind of this game started, I was looking at kind of Mechelen's form, I guess, at home and away from home. And their success this season seems to have really been built on that home form. Like, away from home, they have not really been as good. I think they were slightly unlucky with some of the goals in this one, and maybe they could feel a bit aggrieved that they didn't get a goal. We can probably talk a little bit about that, what we think about that. I mean, it clearly was over the line. It's just whether you believe that Lauerbach was interfering with play or not. I personally was quite surprised he even started, to be honest. I thought the form Raman's been in, I thought he'd go with him. And I looked it up as well, and Raman, so even after this game, he's almost got more goals than Lauerbach in a fraction of the time. And maybe, I think with what Hazi sees in Lauerbach, he sees that kind of big imposing big presence. I don't know whether imposing is probably not the right word, but he sees like the kind of the height and stuff, and maybe that's what he likes to have up front. I don't know. We know he liked having Slimani in that position last time, but if you're looking for a goal scorer, a poacher, someone like that, like Raman is clearly the guy. Like, his goal in this game was like just classic kind of sniffing around the box and stuff. But Natural Ferry scored some decent goals as well in this one. He'll be quite happy. It seems like he can only score 2 at a time. Like, he can't. If he scores 1, he's probably going to grab a second. That seems to be the way he's been going this season. Interesting as well. I think we got to touch on the banners that came out, which I feel like I didn't see that coming, in sense of the banners that were raised. If people haven't seen them, a couple of Kortrijk fans put up banners saying Freya out, which is interesting. I feel like we've kind of not noticed that, maybe not noticed the discontent. I know he was linked with the Iceland job, and we know there was that thing about Cardiff and stuff, so maybe that's frustrated some fans. But it was interesting to see kind of how his stock is kind of dropping amongst the Kortrijk fans. And we'll talk about another manager, obviously, who ended last season very, very well and suddenly isn't looking as good as they did at that time. But a frustrating loss for Mechelen, because it's one of those games that on paper, if they're serious about challenging for the top 6, they should win. For Kortrijk, it's just like, why can't they be this efficient and this, like, they need to put a run of games together, but we know they're probably just going to go and drop points in their next one, because that just seems to be the way they do things this season.
Well, it's the first time Kortrijk have scored 3 goals in the league since March. The 3rd of March against Molenbeek last season was the last time they scored 3 goals. I mean, it just, I think perfect timing. Actually, perfect timing to get 3 points for Kortrijk, particularly in the light of, the Freya out signs. I think there is a section of the Kortrijk fans who've already made their mind up about Freyr for whatever reason and are no longer open-minded to the fact that, the club, face a difficult situation to get any consistency going, as we know, and they've already made their mind up about that. Sometimes very small things ultimately, turn fans' minds about things like that. Joris has quite correctly just recorrected me in the group chat, everybody. Those 3 goals, of course, they did score 3 in the playoff final, which I hadn't forgotten. I just wasn't really counting because it wasn't part of the sort of, regular season. But yeah, it's a fair point. It is a fair point. They actually played quite well this weekend, Kortrijk. I thought they were well worth their victory. I thought they were hungrier, sharper, more energetic. They just looked really up for it and wanted to get in about Mechelen. Conversely, Mechelen didn't look like they were particularly up for the fight, lacking sharpness in duels and in the second balls. And Hasney said that afterwards, actually. He said, look, he says, we just weren't sharp enough in all the key areas of the game, really, to even be in it. And, when that happens, you're always going to be in trouble in this league. I thought it was a really good humdinging physical Pro League match. We know how physical this league is, but I was really enjoying seeing lots of one-on-one battles going on all over the place. And in some respects, it's quite a disjointed game. There wasn't that much flow to it, but I didn't mind that because it looked like there was lots of rough and tumble going on in a good way, which was actually quite enjoyable to watch, particularly from my perspective, and certainly it will have been for neutral perspective as well. But Mechelen didn't deserve anything out of the game. They'll be frustrated because, as Ben says, this is a game really where they should be getting some points. I had a feeling a few weeks ago that they were on a trajectory that suggested that if they could maintain their form, and this is just one game, of course, but they do have the potential to push quite hard for a playoff 1 place this year, much like they did last year. Obviously, they miss out, but I felt that, with some factors going in their favour at the moment, that, that's a possibility. And it is still the case and probably is the aim internally. We'll see if they can do that. But yeah, other results this weekend also going in Kortrijk's favour, and they find themselves, lo and behold, out of the automatic drop zone, and that's got to be a big boost to them at the moment. And I'm sure the message is, keep doing what you did this weekend, and we should pick up more points.
Out of the automatic drop zone is debatable as well, because that's in theory not in being in the last 4, and that there still are. But they did a good job here anyway, for sure. Not the only team down there that did in comparison to last week, but we'll get through that with all the other games as well. Yeah, like Scott mentioned, I had noted down it as well. The last time that Kortrijk scored 3 goals or more, I think in the playoff final, it was 4 in the end against Lommel. I had counted that as, well, it was quite decisive for them still being in this league. And it's an official game, I guess. Was my criterion. But still, I guess, it's how you look at it. Main thing to mention for Kortrijk, I think Kadri's move before the first goal. I enjoyed that. I think it's not coming into the statistics, but it was decisive nonetheless. Very involved at all 3 goals as well in one way or another. That's a good sign. Also, whenever Ferry scores, Kortrijk win. So they really need to find a way to get him scoring more, I guess. Then their problems might disappear soon. If it was only that easy, of course. If it were only that easy. But So, but a good win for Kortrijk, a much needed one as well. They do need to keep that up. A good win against a side that has been good this season as well. It's also not the first time they do that either. On Mechelen, Ben mentioned Raman rightfully scoring now in 3 consecutive games as well, but the caveat there is, of course, also like none of them are actually decisive goals. 2 games of them, those they lost, and the third one they won convincingly. Arguably, it was a 2-0, so I guess you could say that's still decisive to put Beerschot last week out of the game, but still nothing completely decisive. That's also it's just a caveat to mention as well. And the Mechelen home and away it's similar to Kortrijk home in a way, I guess, as well a bit. Are two different sides, even though it's not always terrible. But in this game, Mechelen were not great. They could have scored. They actually did score one controversially disallowed goal as well, I guess. I could get why it was disallowed, obstruction of Van den Berge. I think at least I can get it if it was just when he was trying to get up. I think I forgot who it was, but was literally lying on him, so he couldn't really jump up, even though the chances are slim that he would have caught that ball, that rebound still, that eventually went in. But yeah, okay, I can get that. But I guess it deserves a mention, unfortunately. like I told last week, we don't want to talk about the referees, but it seems that I'm attracting them whenever I'm back. This week again, a few questionable decisions, which we will touch on later on. But this one, I guess I could get. Not ideal, of course, for Mechelen to not win this game, but. As it has proven, they were not the only sides in the top of the classification that have dropped points either. So maybe it's not the worst weekend to do it as well.
Yeah, it seems like a bad time to drop points if you're at the bottom this weekend with some of the results that went that way. But yeah, I feel like for Kortrijk, if they can kind of win their home games and be like that at home, because they should have a pretty decent home record. Like the fan support there is pretty good at home. They can make a quite decent atmosphere of it, so they have got that going for them. Let's go to Club Brugge, a side that Scott saw very closely this week in the Champions League. So I feel like we could probably talk a little bit more about that game than we need to talk about this game. They obviously beat Deinze by 4-1. I was kind of like, this is the result I expected in this game. But then when Deinze took the lead, I was like, here we go. We got a game on our hands. And their goal was really nice, actually. They've done this a couple of times where they can put some moves together that are really, really nice. And Gavet finished it off really, really well. But it just did feel like inevitable that Club would be able to kind of twist the screw and finish them off. It took them a little bit of longer than they probably wanted to. Deinze obviously losing Fila to an injury as well. There's going to be a little bit of a blow. He's been pretty decent for them. Just a bit of extra quality in defensive and out wide and stuff like that. So that will probably be a little bit frustrating for Vincent Everard, as well as the nature of some of the goals they conceded. But for Club, I'll give kind of what I saw from the TV, and then Scott, you can kind of tell us what it was like in the ground for the Champions League game. But that first half, I thought they should have been well ahead. They were really, really good. Again, they've done this in the Champions League this season where they've looked that they can compete at the level. And it's really frustrating that the results aren't reflecting that because of these kind of lapses and stuff. Although I have to say the own goal was one of the funniest own goals I've seen. And that's two kind of Champions League games in a row where a brain dead moment from a British centre back has helped them out. So bring on the British centre backs every now. I feel like if John Stones is playing in a Man City game, he's due a mistake to help them there, because that just seems to be the way things are going this season. Celtic better in the second half, but I was expecting a lot more, I guess, from your boys, Scott, in that first half. I felt like the way, maybe this is just the way the Scottish media have been portraying it, felt like Celtic were going to really take it to Club, and Club wouldn't be able to deal with the kind of the atmosphere and stuff, which we know is incredible. Champions League nights at Celtic are usually fantastic, but it was flat to begin with, and Club really did. They just took the whole thing out of the thing there. They really, really did do well, and I think they should be frustrated that they didn't get the win, but I feel like they can look at their Champions League performances this season and be pretty happy with that they're competitive, but frustrated that they haven't got the points to reflect that. But obviously, Scott, you were there, so kind of tell us what the game was like, but also kind of the whole experience stuff, because obviously you were mingling a lot more with the club, kind of the staff and the players and stuff. So it'd be really interesting just to hear kind of, how it was, because we all saw the pictures and stuff, but you were obviously there, so we're obviously very jealous.
Yeah, and I should tell everybody, I sent the guys a little message not long before kickoff saying wish you were here. It was kind of one of those moments, but we've had quite a few of these moments as a team kind of over time now. I was at Celtic Park this past week at the game on media duties for the BFP. Big shout out to everybody at Club Brugge, by the way. Thank you for the access and all of the support. Really, really good experience. Yeah, I mean, I was at the pre-match press conferences. Nicky Hyen and Brandon Mekala were at that. I was also at Celtic's pre-match press conference, actually. Obviously, Brendan Rodgers and a certain Cameron Carter-Vickers was the Celtic player at the pre-match press conference, which, in light of what happened in the game, has added significance now. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk at that pre-match press conference, actually, about the literal noise around the game, and would Club Brugge be blown away coming into that environment? How would they cope with what is famously one of the most well-known home environments on a European night? And Nicky Hyen did say, he said, look, and he did something I think that was very, very Belgian, I have to say. Joris can tell us what he thinks of this in a moment. He was very keen to play it down, and he basically said, look, there's a lot of noise around this game, literal and otherwise. He says, all we have to do is approach the game properly, do our preparation, support one another out in the pitch, because we know we could face, some difficult moments during the game, but ultimately the whole thing is played between the white lines. So he's, that I'm not really interested in any of the noise and hysteria around, what we're coming into. It's all about what we do in the pitch, which I thought was really interesting. And in the first half in the game itself, completely dominated it. Could have been more than one up at half time. Second half, Celtic did improve, which I think most people were expecting them to be better in the second half. They were really poor, sloppy, and really passive in the first half. Really allowed Club Brugge to set all of the tempo, and actively, gave them some of the transitions in some moments. I think Celtic's improvement in the second half, tactical thing going on with Club Brugge, in that I think they took a decision, particularly at the midpoint in the second half, where they thought, right, we're going to dig in and hold on to this, I think. Jukla's goal, not much in it. At the time, obviously, we couldn't see the pictures. I was sitting in the press box in amongst all the Belgian media. And some of the media there actually had coverage on their laptop, so I was able to lean over somebody's shoulder and get a slightly closer view. But it wasn't until a few minutes afterwards that I saw that it probably was right to be narrowly off. That set the cat amongst the pigeons, kind of I must say. And it's funny, Celtic Park's a unique place in European nights, particularly if Celtic are not playing well. The atmosphere can become very flat. And generally, the atmosphere was quite flat in the evening. I spoke to some Celtic fans I know afterwards who said the atmosphere in there was not great tonight, and I have to say I kind of agree. It wasn't quite what it normally is, but yeah, club dug in really for the last 20 minutes, and were just happy to get away with a draw, I think, because I think they felt that if they'd pushed on to try and nick it themselves, there was a real danger it would have potentially gone the other way and they could have lost it. So I think there was a deliberate decision to dig in for the point. And I actually spoke to Nicky Hyen about this afterwards at the post-match press conference. I asked him, why fall so deep near the end? Was that a deliberate decision to dig in for a point? And he said, yeah, absolutely it was. He said he felt that if they pushed on, they would have left too much space for Celtic to expose, and the danger was that the game could have gone against them. So they were being quite pragmatic about it. But a great evening, met some great people on the Belgian media side of things, some lovely Belgian photographers as well, who had some great stories, which I don't have time to share here. Caught up with Nicky Hyen as well. Had lots of interesting things to say. Probably another day is the best time to reveal some of that. But yeah, great experience. A good night for club, actually. I think a draw was a fair result. As far as this weekend's game goes in the league against Deinze, something very similar happened. Club utterly dominant in the first half, completely controlling the game. But for one moment, obviously, but they kind of go behind. And then the strange thing happened where they became quite passive in the second half again, and only managed to get it over the line, convincingly, kind of quite late on. And that's something we've seen from them this season. Big spells of domination, and then these spells in games where, they become kind of quite passive. Although they ran out deserving winners in the end. I thought the third goal was my favourite of the four. Really nice goal, great move. On Dender, I think that's only 3 points from the last 18, I think now. Dropped down to 11th. And although they're still playing not too badly, I think the worries are increasing a little bit that they're getting dragged into something that they don't want to get dragged into, slowly but surely.
On the other hand, that's what everyone expected before the season anyway, so they're still ahead of schedule. But yeah, like I mentioned last week, they do desperately need some wins, but they will not have circled this fixture to get that one, even though they definitely will have had some hope once they got that lead. They actually didn't start too badly. They defended quite well, I guess, especially their goal that was after around 15 minutes was actually the first chance in the game. So that shows that at least they were holding out until that point. But then they gave it away really quickly in a matter of 5 minutes, I think, 5 or so. Well, but also, yeah, bad decisions. They were not composed enough on the ball in the end, gifting Jutla his first job, the goal in the Pro League this season as well. So that's a nice confidence boost for him, even though it was an easy goal, obviously. But he was also involved at the attack as well for the equalizer, so important one as well. Indeed, apart from that, scoreline doesn't really completely reflect how the game went, but Club are scoring again, even if it's sometimes only at the end of the game, to kill it. Whether that solves their issues on that's also something I guess we can't really conclude on in this game. But they'll be scoring twice. That's probably good. The fans also will be happy to especially happy with that third goal with the assist from Sabe to Talbi, 2 youth players involved there. That's always nice to see. Yeah. Then here there's another. I guess we can mention it as well. The Mechelen handball, double handball, actually. Like, I think indeed, given the current rules, that is the correct decision. But it looked, strange to see as well. But yeah, that will. I mean, at that point it was 2-1. That I can say. But apart from that, since the game panned out like it did, there's not that much commotion about it anymore. Plus, it's supposedly the correct decision as well. So, on Dender, furthermore, Scheidler, imitating Dolberg's assist from last week a little bit, but in my opinion, even a bit more difficult. So even better. That was put in by Kvet. Not doing enough, I guess, as well as in a way, because Club Brugge gave a lot of space away in the defense as well. So they should have been a bit more brave sometimes in attack and a bit more composed, like I mentioned before already. And the main thing for them, one of the main things for them there as well is, of course, they have conceded 8 in the final 10 minutes so far already. Even without those 8, they would already have would be among the worst defenses in the league. But it to subtract those, and they're at least a bit in the mix now. They're not the worst defense, but really down that list nonetheless as well. And something to work on, I guess. Even though I guess for this game, most likely it would not have made a big difference.
Yeah, I think they kind of have to work on both ends at the moment. And I think because I was just looking like Kvet's their joint top scorer than Simba and Bert, and I'm pretty sure Simba and Bert haven't scored since like the opening day of the season or something ridiculous like that. Those guys haven't scored for ages. So I think everyone's probably that's probably his main concern as well, is that if we're conceding late and we've got like no hope of scoring down the other end, it's a pretty big concern. Club obviously go up against Patrick Eisen in the Cup, a trophy that's eluded them for almost it would be a decade since they last won the final coming up. So despite their dominance over the last couple of years, that is a trophy that has really, really eluded them. So at the time of recording, they're about to play Patra, so we don't know the result. But wonder how hot the changing rooms will be for them when they go to that. Or cold. Who knows? Cold showers.
That's if they're unlocked.
Yeah, maybe they've knocked them down, turned them into the. Maybe they're getting changed in the boot room or something. I don't know.
There's a funny story around that today as well, and the FA confirmed today that they've postponed the disciplinary hearing into Patro's behaviour around the previous round, obviously with the beat Charleroi, all the shenanigans around heaters being on and not on, and rooms and toilet access being, locked and unlocked. It's all been kind of postponed, and Steinem was saying this week, he says, I don't care, he says, we're going to fight this. We're going to fight this all the way. And it's just, I just think, without getting into it too much, this is just not a way people should be behaving. We know teams take advantage of subtle little things. And in the grand scheme of things, these are small things, but it's not good. You just don't behave like that towards people. You know what I mean? It's not great. It's not great at all.
And for tonight's game, there's a bailiff appointed by Pato Elsen, I believe, as well, to check on the truth of the stories and to see that everything is indeed going well. And I'm not sure, I didn't completely follow the story if it was only for tonight's game or even all games from now on. Like, they were indeed going to defend themselves.
Let's go to the team that they battered. I mean, there's still no excuse for what Charleroi, like the terrible performance they put in. Let's be honest. You can be annoyed about that stuff. You don't then go and get hammered by a second division side. They left it very late to grab an equaliser against Stanley Liège. That, in truth, they probably did deserve. Like, they had a lot of the ball, they had a lot of the chances, but their strikers usually can't score. But the bag scored, and then decided that he's going to piss off the entire Charleroi ultras by shushing them, and then cupping his thing to his ear, and then sticking it out on his Instagram. Much to the delight of those fans who were like, never play for us again, basically, in the thing they said. So that was a strange one. They're like, we've supported you throughout this, all this, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, not another kind of watching this game and being like, I don't know how this team's going to score. Dan Heymans is suspended, like no one else can score any goals, but it could be a big boost for them. I mean, they've been on such a terrible run of form lately, apart from that win over Vessela a couple of weeks ago, but I don't know, it doesn't just paper over more cracks. It just seems against the standard team that just, isn't great, but the goal they scored was so simple. The defending was so bad. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, as Walloon derbies go, and obviously this is the main one, there are others. For those listening, we know there are other Walloon derbies, but yeah, for the main Walloon derby, this was really lacklustre stuff, I thought, and the fixture generally has been, okay, there's been a lot of noise and drama around it, perhaps over the last couple of years, but in terms of on the pitch, it's been quite a poor fixture for a little while now. Still, I think, was it 3 years now since the Zebras won a Walloon derby, so desperate for a win, really. But yeah, really lacklustre stuff. And in truth, neither side were particularly good. I mean, Rick DeMille literally said that afterwards. He said, look, neither us nor Standard were good at all. Lecco frustrated at the manner of conceding so late as well. He thought he'd done the double for this season, the Walloon double victory, but it wasn't to be. Just not a great game. And of course, there was the pause very early on at the start of the game as well, from nobody being able to see anything.
That didn't really go much better afterwards, I guess. That's given your comments, but they're definitely right with that. That didn't kick off the game nicely. Although it's not more than it is as either, but yeah, it's still that delay didn't. It wasn't a good omen for the game itself, I guess, either. But I guess for Charleroi, Stulic played quite well up front. He's a bit unlucky, and I know it's happening too often, so it's probably not only luck, but in the past few weeks in his finishing, last week with Elavadi's save on the line for a ball he should have scored, and also this week he hit the post twice. Luckily, I guess that second one turned into the assist for Tabak's first goal of the season as well. So yeah, that shows once more. I think Stulic has also only one goal so far, or maybe even none this season. So yeah, also one. Yeah, probably he's a joint top scorer with that as well now. But yeah, that sums it up really really nicely. And we also know Standard is also not a high scoring team at all. It's the worst scoring team of all even. So yeah, that's definitely not really inviting to watch that game. And unfortunately, these things came true. Kuavita also scored his first goal of the season. I guess that's also worth to mention in the same breath. Yeah, and Standard failing to temporarily at that point at least join the top 6. And I feel like they took it too easy in the second half as well. They probably could have gotten it. Well, obviously they only conceded in the final minutes, so they were not far away from winning it. But this would have been a really important win. Given all kinds of results in the top of the classification as well. And on Standard, well, we know they don't score much. We know Zekiri scores once in a while. He also gave his first assist of the season, and well, I was joking, although it actually might be true that Dabage and Stulic might be joint top scorer of Charleroi, but no player at Standard has given more than one assist so far. Yeah, that's quite related to that. So that's also not an encouraging stat, especially since Bulat in the beginning of the season was quite good at giving set pieces. So yeah, you would expect some assists from there, but it does not look like it that's happening by him or anyone else. Of course, also from Standard, the irony a little bit of putting Baudard in goal to get some, hopefully gather some more interest again as well, and at the same time results on the short term. Conceding now in the final minutes, not that he could do anything about that goal, but also it seems like he picked up an injury as well. So Epolo will be back in goal after only, what is it, 2 games in the end only that he lost the place between the sticks. That will be good for the confidence of everyone, and the decisions that have been made at Standard, of course. Even though I was, I guess, more or less defending that decision last week. Yeah, this doesn't really help the case, and this shows another reason why maybe you should not have done it in the end. But okay, of course, we have to see how Apple reacts on that. Well, he will have his place back anyway, so maybe he's not too down about it either, and it will have helped his confidence to have been out for a little while.
Yeah, who knows, take him out of the spotlight for 2 games might just help him kind of refocus and reset and kind of look at the tape, do all that sort of stuff, and then come back again. It could be a good thing. He seems, kind of judging from his reaction around the whole thing, it looked like he kind of understood what was happening to him and stuff. But from that kind of 2 pretty drab teams to 2 very entertaining teams this season when they play against each other, like there's no shortage of goals and controversy and all that sort of that when we get Centurion against Genk. Bertocchini loves playing against Genk apparently this season. That's 4 goals for him in that sense. Tolu, obviously, it was nice to see kind of the 2 top goal scorers going head to head, wasn't it, and trying to outdo each other in that sense. I personally thought Van Kromberger, and I don't know why I'm saying personally as if I'm the only person that thought this, I thought he was fantastic in this game. He made some really, really crucial saves at plenty of different times to kind of keep Genk in it. They then get what is a controversial goal in many situations. I have to say, when I was watching the replay, I was like, I just couldn't work it out. I don't know if you guys are the same. When they kept showing it and showing it and showing it, and I was like, I couldn't. At some angles, it was like, oh, he's clearly handballed it, and then at other instances, it's like, no, he's not actually handballed it. It's just come off and gone back and sort of stuff. And then I see that some people are giving the Kakubo own goal, which is poor goalkeeper. Bertocchini's like the most frustrated at it, but then you also like, but mate, you were marking him. Like you should probably actually have just defended it. Like it was such a terrible situation. Like it just bobbled around for so long, and bobbled into the back of the net. So probably frustrated. And the ironic thing is, after all this sort of happened, Genk should have won the game because somehow St. Truden were completely wide open. Genk had it was like a 4-on-1, and O was like, I'm going to shoot from outside the box. And it's like, mate, you could have passed it to anyone else, and you took the literal worst decision you could possibly have taken in that situation. And I think even Kayembe was next to him, sprinting up from defence. He just looked at him like, mate, I've literally just charged forward. You just had to slot me the ball, play it across. We're probably taking a 3-2 win that we probably didn't deserve. I thought St. Truden were much the better team in this one. But yeah, I don't know. Joris probably doesn't agree with us, but Scott, I feel like I could just watch these two teams go at each other every week. It's great. It's very entertaining. Not good for Joris's heart rate and probably health, but for the rest of us, it's fantastic.
Well, we've gone from a lacklustre derby fixture to, as you were saying, a fixture that, in recent years has actually been pretty good, both from an entertainment value and from a goals point of view. And it wasn't any different this weekend either. I was really interested coming into this to see how St. Truden were going to react after getting absolutely horsed 7-0 by Club for the international break. I thought, they were bound to be up for it. Joris was expecting them to be in the right place, which they were, but I thought it's going to be really interesting just to see how they respond to it. They go behind in this game, and then it becomes really all about them. Great movement, great tempo to some of their play. That save, Ben was talking about Van Krombrugge. There's one particular save, the one that comes off his foot when he's effectively heading in the wrong direction to the shot. I mean, that was a wild moment, actually, kind of pure luck, but, an element of quality in it. Really good goalkeepers, we know in these situations, spread your body as much as possible. And even if you don't, get to it through anything you actually do, the sheer size of your body might give you an outside chance of saving something. And that was an unreal save, actually. In some ways, one of the moments of the weekend. But yeah, I mean, St. Truden deserved to win the game. I think they did. Some frustration and anger afterwards. On the controversial equaliser itself, I still think all of the camera angles are pretty inconclusive. You can argue things either way. I didn't see anything on any angle, including the angles that came out later. We did see some alternate angles after the game that weren't available at the time that still, although they were different, weren't conclusive. So I can completely understand why the goal stood and was kind of given, because there was nothing to suggest that anything clearly untoward had happened, I don't think, and I still think that. So I think it probably was the right decision. I understand St. Truden being very unhappy about it, but they're going to be, aren't they? They're going to be. Bertoncini had plenty to say. Of course, he's going to say that. Mazu didn't really want to talk about it post-match, which I think was probably right, just to kind of try and take the heat out of it a little bit. Ben mentioned Bertoncini, 4 of his 10 goals coming against Genk this season. That's the second time he's got a brace against them as well. Clearly likes this fixture, really up for it. Joint top scorer now with big Tolo Rokudari and Kasper Dolberg as well. And Ryotaro Ito, actually, we shout out to him here. I thought he had a pretty good game as well. But yeah, bags of entertainment in this one. These sides have interesting fixtures coming up. St. Truden have got Circle away in the Cup, then a couple of big games, Ghent and Anderlecht, and Genk have an equally big game coming up in the Cup against Standard, and then Kortrijk and Club Brugge in the league. So plenty to keep these two occupied.
Definitely, and no argument there. The Sint-Truiden definitely were the better side in this game and arguably could have won it. At least on that part, no arguments. Some things maybe still. Van Krombrugge, that was a really great save. So I wanted to say save of the weekend and probably still true. But on that second goal, if he doesn't come out, the goal is not empty. Okay, it's still a 1-on-1. It's a big chance, but that I guess you could write that on him. And that first goal, initially that looked really nicely placed in the corner, but it's closer to the middle of the goal than you think. So I mean, it's not a real mistake, but you might have expected some kind of reaction still of him. But okay, he's the last person to say anything about, and I still did it here. But that's the irony as well. But he was definitely not the problem of Genk. On that first goal, Sadelberger is marking no one twice, both for the assist giver in the end and on Bertaccini, giving him freeway to that area to shoot, where he already had shots from not too badly, not that much before either. So, but yeah, also, yeah, are understandable that Bertaccini is frustrated. Has been as you guys both actually mentioned. I guess he scored a few times already for 4 goals of his 10 goals. With which he's also a joint top scorer, by the way. Of course, still against Genk to only get 1 point out of that. Yeah, given the 2 games that have been played, especially this one, that must be frustrating. Although, indeed, yeah. He was very frustrated, but I don't think his explanation makes any sense, because I don't think he said. I think he said it hit the elbow of Bangura, and I have to admit, I do think it was a handball. Ultimately, also have to say, I'm more and more convinced by looking at it more and more. But the problem is you can't really convincingly see that, and I guess then it's more like a legislation thing. Literally, the principles of justice that come into play here. And yeah, that really there seems to be like a very unnatural movement of the ball before it crosses the line or before it hits Kokubo. Then I guess potentially. In mid-air where his hand is in the area, but you can't really see the touch, at least. And yeah, I guess, like I said, that's probably where this legislators see that, and this system comes into play, I guess. But I can completely understand the frustration there. I'm happy that nothing was given, obviously, but it's difficult pill to swallow, especially after having this last minute goal taken away at Standard not that long ago, where Bertaccini was also involved in referring to, I believe, even as well. Having said that, it's been 7 years since Sint-Truiden have won a derby in Staaien. Also a few years since Genk won, so like you can see, it's always tight and often a draw lately. But and apart from that, from my side, from Genk, not that much to say, I guess, except, well, yeah, they were still efficient, so that's maybe positive in a way. They scored 2 goals out of, well, officially 2 shots on target, but I believe there was a header from Tolu that was right before the 2-2. That must be the third one, or that man must have been going outside. That was one real save Kokubo made anyway. Had to make as well, so he's no blaming him there. But yeah, on the other hand, they only had 2 or maybe 3 shots on target against the side that just conceded 7 the week before. That's a bit worrying. And then they're going through a relatively bad spell. They're still picking up points enough so far, but the level of play is dipping, and that's the slight worry, as I mentioned last week already as well. There's a big, and Scott was already mentioning some of the fixtures here as well, but there's a big December month coming with games against Standard in the Cup this week, then against Club Brugge in 10 days' time, but also still games against Anderlecht and Antwerp as well. So there's a slight mini playoff one going on for Genk before they have a slight break. And they will need to improve their level again, I feel. On the other hand, it seems like they're dropping most points so far actually against teams that are lower in the table or were lower at the table when they played against them. In the case of Union, they climbed up, and that was to be expected as well. But at that time, they were quite down in the table. Hopefully, I can get some courage from that, and that it goes better. At least level of play, mainly, to be honest, at the moment. Obviously, points as well, but I would try to see some some better games again as well.
Yeah, it's funny. You kind of read my mind there, Joris, because you mentioned all those teams that they've got playing up, and then I was about to say they're playing Kortrijk. Like, that's the hardest game they've probably got, because Kortrijk just love like beating teams that are on good runs of form, and they're the first team to beat them this season. So watch out for that one.
Second team, but
second team. Sorry, yes. After the long run, that's what I was thinking of. Since Sweden, those 2 points would have been really valuable, because they're part of how many teams? 1, 2, 3, 4 teams on 18 points, Kortrijk on 17 points. Then you've got Circle on 15, Beerschot on 10. Beerschot were on 7. They finally reached double figures. Congratulations to Dirk Kout's men. Came, and the consequences of it were pretty drastic for Circle. Should have easily kind of put this game to bed, and it looked like they had put this game to bed by half-time, 2-0 up. But Beerschot, they've got some backbone. We've got to say that they're going to keep going. They're going to keep fighting, and the kind of Henderson gets one back. Utka's red card just kind of it killed it. That whole sequence, I think, just killed Circle off. And yeah, him getting sent off, and then the penalty obviously being saved by Deinze, and then being tucked in. No following on that. The Klassen goal was just shambolic. Really, it was such a bad goal. But he needed something to go in, didn't he? He's. I still don't really know what he is as a footballer at this moment in time, Klassen. I'm just not sure, really not sure. But yeah, obviously the kind of result of this defeat, unsurprisingly, I guess, but maybe also surprisingly, was that Miran Muslic was sacked by Circle, or the collaboration ended, as they say. I feel like that's probably going to be the topic of our discussion around this game. I feel like we've probably all got a little bit of a kind of thing to say about this. Just to kind of quickly go into it. Obviously, they came off the back of that win in Europe against Hearts, where again it wasn't the best of games. I thought Paris Brunner was ridiculously good. Eventually, like at first, he looked really, really kind of shaky and lacking any confidence, but he really grew into that game against Hearts, and by the end of it, he was just dictating everything. He was bullying players and stuff. For a teenager, it was quite frightening to see, like a man of that size. I feel like when I was a teenager, I was so much skinnier than he was. He's an absolute beast. But Denki scoring twice in this one, and then like it just felt like when that final whistle went, I was like, I feel like something is going to happen. I feel like they're going to make a decision. And in my personal opinion, like obviously for us, we've met Miran. We're quite like, we like him as a man, as a manager as well. And the job he did at Circle has been fantastic. And the fans themselves are pissed. I think the majority of them, the reaction I've seen is a lot of them are angry because they feel like he's the scapegoat for decisions that were made in the summer that could have really helped him. Others are kind of like, well, we understand why this has happened, but we're upset that it's happened to him, because I personally feel like he should have just been backed in January. I feel like they should have just said, right, like, we know you're a good head coach. We know that you can get the best out of young players, but in January we're going to bring in some experienced players just to help this team out, because it's such a young team. They're balancing European football and domestic football. He was kind of thrown the short straw, that Icelandic kind of clash against Viking. I think it was the first real sense of like, there's not as much cohesion as there usually has been in Circle, because you could tell he didn't like that decision. That didn't go down well with him. And from then on, I feel like they've probably, like, yes, they said they patched it up and stuff, but it feels like there was something kind of clashing there. And I don't know, we kind of were thinking as well, like, who's going to take over and do a better job? Like, who are you bringing in that's going to do a better job with this team that he's kind of helped build and stuff like that? The summer signings haven't really come off, and we know that they've had the money to be able to do that. They'll obviously have the Denki money in January, which is, again, another reason why I think he should have just been kept until January, and you kind of back him and stuff like that. But if you're looking from the outside looking in, this is just the way every football team seems to be operating at the moment. It doesn't matter what you did a couple of months ago. It's all about the here and now. They've clearly sat there and thought, we have to make a decision. We kind of don't think he's going to keep us up, and they make that decision. And at the end of the day, these are the decisions that Carlos used to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, Carlos had no kind of sentimentality when it came to this. He'd just be like, I believe this is the decision I want to make, and this decision we're going to do. I don't care if the fans are upset. I'm going to make the decision because I know what's right. I don't know whether he'd have sacked Miran. I think this is kind of like the really interesting thing I was thinking about. Like, would Carlos have made this decision? Like, we know that he believed that Miran's a very good coach, but Carlos didn't. He had been like, he might have made exactly the same decisions. You know what I mean? I was just trying to think, like, would he have made exactly the same call? But yeah, I know that, Scott, you've probably got lots to say. Joris, you've probably got lots to say. And we've also got to kind of talk about Beerschot winning, because that brings them right back into the kind of staying in the league picture. So yeah, plenty to talk about in this one. And then we've got another manager to talk about after this. So it's going to be a reasonably long episode because we've got so much to talk about. But that's kind of my hazy kind of put together thoughts on the Milan situation. And yeah, interested to see what you guys think.
Well, on Beerschot, first of all, really nice story around this game, actually, that's kind of worth sharing with everybody. Obviously, Beerschot go in 2-0 down at half time. You think, okay, here we go again, another 3 points, not going to Beerschot. What does Dirk Kuyt talk about at half time in the dressing room? Well, Dirk Kuyt talks about his Feyenoord. Of course, Feyenoord's, indelibly linked with Feyenoord. Of course, Liverpool fans will, of course, big relationship with Liverpool, but Feyenoord and Dirk Kuyt are a thing, obviously. And he was quite happy to tell the world afterwards that what he spoke about at half-time to get them fired up and into this game was Feyenoord being 3-0 down to Manchester City and, pulling that 3-3 draw out the bag. He said, look, you can do it, and if they can do it, then, we can do it. And they did. I mean, from Circle's perspective, look, they collapsed in that second half. They absolutely collapsed for a host of reasons. There were some key decisions in the game, as Ben was saying, that absolutely went against them, that, allowed the momentum to really run roughshod right over them. But they did collapse. And didn't perform well at all in any area in the second half. And it just shouldn't have happened, actually. It's one of those things that really shouldn't happen, especially against the Beerschot side that are actually pretty poor. So it's a poor result. On the Muslic departure, I think a couple of things to say about this. On a personal level, I'm really sorry to see it happen, because I think he's a great guy. I think big fan of this podcast. We know he listens. I think he's an incredibly important figure at that club. Or was up until a few hours ago, of course. I think the main thing here is, I think Circle's history books will recognise Miran Muslic very, very kindly indeed, I think, and rightly so, for a number of reasons. I think from a footballing operations point of view, he's been very exposed, as Ben was kind of getting at from the beginning of the season. They lost a lot of players who performed consistently and performed well last season, and I was looking at this today. They've lost Jesper Dahlund. They lost Leonardo Lopez, another player who, really important contribution last season. They lost Hugo Sike, who they were always going to lose. They were never going to be able to hold on to Sike, I don't think, anyway. But other players they lost who, not insignificant, Emilio Kerr, Thomas Didion as well, although Varlason has stepped up over the last year, Boris Popovic. They've lost some really important players there who did a really good job last season. The whole Deinze situation was incredibly disruptive and rumbled on for far too long, and you can get into the ins and outs of that, but ultimately they've done a reasonably good deal, but it should have been settled earlier. That it was quite messy for a range of reasons. So you have a situation now where they're still struggling in an area at the bottom of the table. They lose this key game, which draws them right into a fight and gets Beerschot back into some kind of conversation now. Me and Joris were talking last week about the Deinze thing. It's now important they get his replacement right. Whoever comes in has to start scoring goals straight away, because there's nobody who can match Deinze's output. So that's a huge problem and challenge to solve. And then you change the manager. You decide to twist. So what are we doing here? What's the strategy and what's the data? Are we throwing out the DNA and the playing profile and going to do something different now here? Or are we just hoping that in twisting we get a new manager bounce? I don't understand the theory behind it, but we all know and accept that the personal relationships have been quite strained for a wee while. That's been quite obvious. And I think ultimately it's come down to that. And some people would say, and have been saying, that this result has been the perfect excuse for that axe to kind of be wielded, because there was a feeling that this was kind of coming. So you've also got fans who, as Ben was saying, are very, very angry at the moment. So you've got to find a solution to your striking problems because nobody's scoring those goals at the moment. And even the big players still at the club, the Alan Mindas of this world, are not performing for whatever reason. So they're not contributing enough. The manager's gone, who was very good. And albeit his contract was ending at the end of the season and he wasn't likely to be staying or it wasn't likely to be renewed, I think seeing the season out and saving them was the smartest option. So I'm not convinced by the twist here at all. I think it leaves them much, much, much more vulnerable and increases all of the worries that were kind of already there. So lots of warning signs for me. So Rembev Raman, who the heat is really on now, and it was with the Deinze situation, has now got another massive decision to make. So I'm sure he's on his phone a lot, consulting a lot of people, talking to Monaco, looking at what sort of coach do we bring in. Are they going to chuck out the house style? That's another thing to look at because they have been tinkering with playing a slightly different way as well. And I don't think Miron has been completely happy over the last few months for a number of reasons. So it's a really unfortunate one, this. Sometimes managers lose, well, all managers are going to lose their job several times in their career. That's the one thing that's certain about football. But sometimes managers lose their jobs rightly and sometimes wrongly. And I think we'll find out. Maybe we'll be wrong. We'll find out. As Ben was saying, Carlos always took executive decisions and Rember will do the same, and that's their job to do that. But we'll find out whether this was the right decision probably sooner rather than later, I suspect. But my gut feeling is this is going to backfire on them.
Yep, there's a few things certainly in life. Debt, taxes, and getting fired if you're a football manager, indeed. But okay, I guess I won't dwell on it that much longer because you guys both said a lot about it already. Although, yeah, the main thing is indeed like, I guess like more also what Scott mentioned, the relationships. Like, I guess that was mainly the issue. It was clear even to Muslic was maybe speaking out a little bit too often for his own good in this specific case, in public against club decisions before already that he needed to follow, that it was not his decision in Iceland, for example. That was something Ben mentioned actually, and so on. Sad to see him go, but unfortunately the harsh reality is they are indeed in that position. But that's not that's not it's not that they're in a hopeless position. And obviously last week Scott and I did hype this game up a little bit as well, on the sense of like really crucial and what the consequences could be. And now of course they have lost it in the most dramatic fashion. So also I can also get it if it's like, well, it shouldn't be happening, but I can get it if that would be a decision made on emotion in that sense as well. Okay, like I said, I won't dwell on it too much. You guys gave all the reasons anyway. I'm only going to repeat them, I guess, otherwise. But on Beerschot, well, I'm not sure if you want to go 2-0 up against Beerschot anymore because they came back from it to win it against Anderlecht. They also came back to it. Okay, that was 2-1 actually, maybe, but still they came back from 2-0 down against Club Brugge just in recent weeks. That's definitely they're really bouncing back. Is it enough? Most likely not, but if they would have lost it, as Scott had called a little bit early, also has been touched on already in our group chats, that then they would have been 10 points down to their closest rival, and having this game against Cercle Brugge already behind the belt. Now, there's still a gap, but it's probably playable. That's definitely a good thing for them. They do like their comebacks, and especially Al Fayed will be happy with it, getting away with it a little bit since they won the game, but he didn't look great on both goals from Cercle, of course, giving away a penalty. That's a clear one, and he could have put Deinze in really easily offside on the first goal as well. Which would have been his second offside goal already, even as well. But and that's another worrying thing for Sterkel, of course, as well. Like nobody else than as Deinze is scoring, but even he scores twice against arguably still the worst side in the league, and still they can't get it over the line and they lose that game. Yeah, that's just all the alarm bells ringing, and I guess. I guess this game there was so much weight on this game that, like, also in that sense, like I said, can get it in both in an emotion way and also maybe even in a rational way as well. But combined with the emotions, though, I also feel like Muslic has been hard done by the board this summer, and maybe should have been given time to the transfer window in winter, like Ben touched on as well. But like I said, I'm repeating you guys here. I think we are all on one line in this case.
Yeah, not really surprised. That I think is quite obvious from the outside. And yeah, I think that's like not being able to see games out. You miss Darland, obviously, like leader and very good defender at the back. But you also miss, like we've mentioned, Da Silva Lopez. He's not even got a club. Like he's just, what is he doing? Like, the guy's such a good footballer. Like, and then I'm not blaming Circler for him not having a club, by the way. I mean, I just don't understand why he doesn't have a team. Like, he's in the prime of his career. He's a very, very good footballer. The guys that have come in to replace him in terms of winning the ball back, they just can't do it like he did it. Him and the Martial, like, were just so good at getting the ball back and moving things up the pitch. Like, they've not been replaced, and that's kind of the problem. I joked with you guys that Leuven should have maybe waited a little bit, because then they could have picked up Muslic instead of the man they did get. They drew 0-0 with Anderlecht, least surprising result of the weekend, because they've drawn 3 in a row now. Anderlecht coming off an entertaining 2-2 draw with Porto in the Europa League, which on paper a good result, but like Porto actually haven't been very good this season, so they might be a little bit frustrated that they didn't get the win in that one. But let's probably not talk about this. Can't bother to talk about the 0-0. It's just pointless. Let's talk about the new man in charge of Leuven, the man that everyone expected to take charge, obviously Chris Coleman, the man on everyone's lips. It was such a clear and obvious decision to make. I think you said that to us, Scott, and I was like, the Chris Coleman, like the actual Chris Coleman. Obviously, Belgian football fans will remember Chris Coleman from the European Championships of 2016 when he knocked out the Belgian side, the golden generation, inverted commas that they don't like to be called and all that. But since then, like, I think many people remember Chris Coleman as what he did at Wales, because his job at Wales was fantastic. Like, let's kind of, you got to give him the credit for that. He took a nation that was just a nothing nation within international football, and with the help of some world-class talent in Gareth Bale, he was able to turn him into something cohesive, something really, really entertaining, and something really, really good. I mean, the fact that the man got Chris Gunter playing like a world-class right-back when he was one of the most boring footballers I've ever had to watch at Reading was just a testament to what he could do as a man manager. So congratulations to Chris. He then went to Sunderland, obviously, and he's not had a great career then. I know, Scott, you probably got a little bit more information on him, but there's something very likeable, I think, about Chris Coleman. There's something, when you hear him speak about football and hear him talk about like the game and players and stuff like that, there's something, he does have something about him. There's positivity. It just feels like, for me, like, is this finally the man that's going to have some ambition with this club? And he's already spoken about that. And I know it's very easy for to say, but he says he sees the side as a top 6 side. And I've always said I see them having the infrastructure to be a side that challenges for the top 6. And that's why he basically quit his job in Cyprus, got on a plane, flew over, signed a contract within 3 days, and here he is. But apparently he wasn't their first choice, which is quite an interesting one. And they had a couple of other names on the list. But the big test would be they play Standard Liège next week, a team that's got 0-0 written all over it. Absolute 0-0 banker, like if it had been Oscar Garcia. Can Chris Coleman, like, is he going to show us something new? Is he going to get the best out of this Leuven side? I don't know, but I feel he's just such an interesting guy. He's like I said, very, very likeable. So it's nice to have him in the league. And it's going to be really interesting to see how he gets to grips with Belgian football because, yes, his career hasn't been great since leaving Wales, but maybe there's that meme, isn't it? That great meme where it's like, that thing didn't work for them, but for us, it might just work. Like, is Chris Coleman going to work for Leuven? I'm not sure, but it's such an interesting hire, isn't it, Scott? And I know you've gone and had a little bit look more at his kind of numbers and stuff. I'm sure there's Sunderland fans screaming at this podcast now, like, don't do it after what he did for them. But yeah, Chris Coleman at Leuven, I never thought I'd say those words.
Well, it wasn't going to be Robbie Keane and it wasn't going to be Fabio Cannavaro, but it is Chris Coleman. The very well-known Chris Coleman. Ben's right. Chris Coleman's actually very likeable. You know, Ben mentioned the kind of keyword, really, positivity. He is quite a positive coach, always has been, likes to try and play front-footed attacking football, doesn't like to muck around too much either, which is interesting because he said quite a lot already, even though he doesn't begin work officially. For another few days, actually. He was at Deinze at the weekend for the game, watching from the stands, and did say something I thought was interesting in terms of his attacking intent positivity. But he said, look, I know we don't have a bad core of players. I've had a look at the core. It's clearly underperforming. Another big tick there. He's recognised one of the major problems. The lack of ambition he's recognised. He's ticked that as well. He's going even further, saying, look, the objective here's got to be pushed for playoff 1 and European football. Absolutely. Show some ambition. It's exciting just to hear that from somebody connected with the club, to be honest. But yeah, talking about the game this weekend, he said, look, from what I saw, we held on to the ball too often a lot of the time. He said there's times where we should have been releasing the ball, having a shot, having a pop, trying to send somebody through, just being a little bit too cagey and cautious at times. So, I think he's going to try and get the players to release the ball quicker, take more shots, and just have more of a go in an offensive sense, which can only be a positive thing because we know that offensively they've got more options there now. So they've kind of got the tools to probably play the way that Chris would like Leuven to play. So it's going to be interesting in that sense. But his wider career, as a player, Man City, Swansea, Crystal Palace, Blackburn, Fulham. He then manages Fulham. Short period in Spain with Real Sociedad, Coventry for a couple of years. He then goes to Greece for the first time, Larissa AEL. Wales is the high water mark, as Ben was saying, 5 years there. Qualifies Wales for the Euros in 2016. We won't mention the Red Devils game. We won't mention that at all. That's not allowed on this podcast. Gets them to the semi-finals, and actually in qualifying for that tournament, that's their first qualification since 1958 as well. So he'll always be remembered for that. There's no doubt about it. Then has an unhappy time at Sunderland. It then gets a bit weird, obviously. He goes to some places where, he's out of the limelight of a lot of mainstream media anyway. Finds himself in China, taking over from Manuel Pellegrini, actually, at Hebei Fortune for a year or so. Then back to Greece, at Tramitos. Doesn't have a great time there. Then in Cyprus for a very short period of time before, obviously, the phone rang and somebody said, his agent, do you want to go to Belgium, Chris? There's a really interesting opportunity come up. And he went, that's a daft question. When's the flight? Here's this wonderful opportunity to reinvigorate his career in a really strong league, which he did. He did say yesterday at his press conference, he said, look, this is a good league. He said, I have been aware of it. So I think the opportunity to come back to a league where there'll be much more focus on him, and he knows the prize here is if he does quite well, the opportunities that are going to open up for him to potentially come back to England, somewhere interesting, become a real possibility again. But he did also say, he said, if you look at my career, he said, I've not managed any really, really big clubs that have been on the up a lot, which might piss off Sunderland fans. Sunderland fans would argue they're a big club. That's a different discussion. But in some ways, this is an interesting fit. Although Hein van Huyzenbroek this weekend did say when asked about Chris Coleman, he said, "Oh, not another Englishman in Belgian football because they've done so well, haven't they?" Which made me laugh. He's always good for a little quip, Hein. But yeah, 497 games all in as a T1. He does only have a win percentage ratio of 32%, which isn't great. But I think he's a reasonable fit here. So it's going to be an interesting one to see unfold.
I'd also say Hines now offended the entire Welsh nation by calling Chris Coleman an Englishman. I feel that's probably one of the most offensive things he could probably talk about. He can talk about his tactics all day long, but if he calls a man an Englishman, I feel like that's just red rag to a bull. That one.
I feel two nations at once. Some going.
I did see everyone's talking about the next Scott Parker. I mean, let's just Scott Parker got. I'm just going to say, I think he got incredibly lucky with the kind of the teams that he managed to get promoted because they were just absolutely minted. Let's be fair; those teams had all the money they needed to get promoted from those things. I think Chris Coleman has done his job at Wales is better than anything Scott Parker did. I'm just going to say it. I think he'll be a better manager in Belgium, but that's just me kind of not really enjoying Scott Parker as a football manager potentially. And you mentioned a job in England. Maybe if Leicester sack Rude, they're just going to ship Coleman, Chris over there. Who knows? George, I don't know if you want to jump in on this, unless you're just in your head reliving 2016 and Howells Carney's ridiculous Cruyff turn in the box. And just
no, we're not allowed to talk about that.
I was going to say, Scott said to you, it's not going to be thought about, but it's already 3 times. Like, even with saying that, Scott also did so much. But I want to pitch in, I guess, like, with his 33 percentage win percentages, he got 1 win in 3 games. Well, that still would be better than Leuven's record this season so far with 3 wins in 16. So I guess that could be enough for this season to survive at least. I guess for this season, that might still be their main worry despite his ambitious words. Just I wanted to mention that as well. And also... looks like that's I didn't know, but since Scott mentioned that he managed Atomitos last season still for a small part of last season, he also will have managed Stuur Dirks, who is most likely a free player soon and looking for a club, and arguably might have signed already, maybe unofficially with another club in Belgium, but maybe there's an option there for them to be reunited.
Yeah, just what they need. Another bloody winger. Don't do it, please. I think the team's fine. I'm looking forward to it. I like Chris. I think, like we said, he's just so positive, and that Sunderland documentary is great with him in it. If people haven't seen the Sunderland documentary on Netflix, that's one of the best footballing documentaries going. It's fantastic, and I'd be offended because I think Sunderland are a big club. They're definitely a big club. Great fan base. Yeah. But I'd say that, they're definitely bigger than Leuven. Let's be fair. Try not to offend Leuven fans, but I think Sunderland are a bigger club. We've spoken kind of about managers needing time, potentially, and stuff, and backing managers. Do you think, I feel like Union maybe starting to reap the rewards of just, because they could have easily just said, okay, this isn't working with Pocognoli, that we're just going to get rid of him and we're going to just bring in someone else. We'll bring Gerrits back or something like that. I don't know. But stuck with him. First win in Europe against 20. They were just, the first 10 minutes, they could have been about 5-0 up. 20 were terrible. And I think the biggest kind of highlight of that game for them was I can't believe someone boots the ball out of play for Union. It bounces behind the stand. And as it bounces up, it hits a guy's beer out of his hand. And then it goes towards another fan who's got a beer, and his mate tries to kick the ball, misses the ball, kicks his beer out of his hand, drops his own beer out of his hand as well. So 3 beers just going absolutely flying in this game. If you haven't seen that, it's so funny. But Union get that win in Europe, fantastic win. They then beat Antwerp with 10 men by 2-1, as we said. And it kind of reminiscent of last year. It feels fitting, doesn't it, that Kevin McAllister is going to score in December. I feel like he should go on an absolute goal-scoring tear in December. It just feels fitting. They can do so many GIFs and memes around it and stuff like that. It's just the social media manager at Union must just be like, this is an absolute dream if he keeps scoring. The second goal I found particularly hilarious because I was just like, I don't know how you stop Sykes scoring unless you have someone who's about 7 foot. Because when he jumps, it's like you can't stop. The man's an absolute giant. There's nothing you can do to stop that going in the back of the net. If he's going to head it on target, it's going in the back of the net. He's just too tall. Antwerp, they're just again showing that they really do struggle against the better teams in this division, and I think that will really frustrate Jonas de Rock once more. Whereas for Union, it felt like a real confidence boosting week for them. They're kind of like, yeah, no, we're kind of getting back on track. We're getting a little bit of mojo back, and I think they've definitely needed that.
Yeah, big confidence boost for Union, coming from behind to win, no doubt about it. Kevin McAllister, Ben mentioned there, that wild moment where he dives in with that head first challenge and takes a boot in the head, that is some insane stuff. I mean, that's the sort of stuff that gets you killed, actually. So, I mean, seriously impressive. But, if you've been watching Kevin McAllister closely, and I don't know why anyone hasn't been, I think he's a brilliant player. From very early on, from a couple of weeks in and starting to see him closely, I thought, I really like this guy. I think he's a really good player. Puts everything on the line for you. Sometimes he gets a little bit cynical, when he has to in a defensive sense. But, that's his footballing education and background, partly because of his nationality. Do you know what I mean? 'Cause it's something that's culturally in his game. But, brilliant player, I think. So big up to Kevin McAllister, I must say. Really frustrating for Antwerp, really. Obviously, they lose a little bit of ground this weekend because of the way results went. Just a little bit. Nothing that'll harm them too much, but that I think is probably the most frustrating thing of all to take away from this game. And also the fact that they played slightly more than 50 minutes against 10 men, but couldn't exploit that. That will be massively irritating to them on lots of levels. And even Janssen actually talking about this afterwards, saying we just didn't use the extra man at all, which was annoying. So, when you don't do that, then, although having said that, interestingly, they weren't the only side this weekend that played a significant proportion of a game against 10 men, but couldn't make it count as well. Beveren had that problem, played very well, but couldn't get the goal to get their game over the line. So they weren't the only ones who couldn't figure out the breaking down 10 men conundrum. But yeah, good boost for Union. Probably, an important time for them, I think.
Yeah, first time they win 2 games in a row, 2 consecutive games this season across all competitions. So yeah, they really needed that. It's end of November, starting the beginning of December. Yeah, that's not something we're used to see from Union in recent years, for sure. What else is to be mentioned there? Van den Berg got a first start. I guess always nice to see youngsters getting a start. They scored twice on set pieces as well. That's another trademark, I guess, as well. But that has shown this game at least. And yeah, that's good for them, because at times this season they have struggled to score that. So they can use the goals from any point, and this will help with that. Janssen, on the other hand, scoring his 7th goal against Union already in 13 games, I believe. So that's quite a good record. It's probably his favorite opponent, much like Bertaccini likes Genk, I guess, as well, to make that segue again. And I found from Antwerp's side mainly the comments a bit interesting, especially from Bataille. He said, we probably started too well, so that's why we didn't win the game. Well, yeah, okay, I get the sentiment that he wants to get across. I do get, they probably were going a bit too laid back afterwards, and yeah, I lost grip on the game because of that. After that, but yeah, I don't think there's such thing as starting a game too well. Also, it was mainly Maurice starting the game too badly. Unfortunately, it had been a while, but this definitely was a goal that he can write. That was his fault. Luckily for him, it didn't cost them. And then another, it's not a comment, but more like a side thing from Antwerp's side, Antwerp fans' side. That there was a strange, incident, I guess you could say. It's been not that big out, but there's images now from a fan that's there is that weird tradition, of course, with what we don't call black Pete anymore, but more like soot Pete, I guess, or carbon Pete, you would call him, I guess. That's the sentiment about it. But anyway, that's not the point. There was a person dressed like him who was asking to exchange shirts with Hirano Kerk, and well, I'll try to be naive and hope this was just not really thought through, and there was no harm intended in that, no racism intended in that, but you can easily read that wrongly. It's like on that bordering line of funny and quite bad actually. So it's not. Yeah, I really hope it was just not well thought through and like a stupid joke gotten out of hand situation instead of actually purposely writing it down like that, because that would be bad.
Yeah, I saw the picture of him and I was like, you just forget about something like that, like Soot Pete, all that weird stuff. And I was like, what the hell? It's just bizarre, absolutely bizarre. Although the one thing I did see in this game that I did like was Lapusan's dancing at the end. I don't know if you guys saw that. He looks buzzing. Like, he looks very happy to be back and involved. And yeah, you can tell the fans love him. And did you see the thing he said? Like, I still go out, but I don't go out on match days or when we got to train the next day anymore. It's just like,
it's good to know.
I was like, mate, come on.
Nobody's believing that. Yes.
Yeah, I was like, sure, mate, sure. But for a bloke that goes out at the time, imagine if he didn't go out at the time, his fitness would be even better. Like, he's incredibly fit, but keep him in. I don't know. One of the sides that had a pretty crap week in Europe were Ghent. They lost 2-0 to Lugano. Watched a bit of this one. Ghent fans were pretty annoyed at the end of the game. You can kind of, marginally say that. They then go to Westerlo, drop it late on. They took the lead. Sonko finally scoring I believe it must be his first league goal for the team. I can't think he's scored any. He's barely played, so I can't imagine he scored before then. Hjulsager back as well. That's quite nice to see. He's just been absolutely crippled with injuries and stuff like that, but it's nice to see him back and creating stuff. But yeah, it's just been a pretty frustrating week for Ghent, I guess you can say, if we go from the Anderlecht game, the Lugano game, and then drawing this one. Franken under a little bit of pressure, everything kind of, I don't know what you guys say. I just feel like, again, it's like you couldn't, if you asked me to predict their starting 11 every week, I just wouldn't be able to do it. Like, it's just be impossible, wouldn't it? Because they change, everything changes so often, and there's no consistency in team kind of selection. A couple of players are getting in every time, but even then, like, Dean isn't always starting, Gandelman doesn't always start, kind of the defense is changing all the time. Like, I feel like it's just too much tinkering. They need to get some consistency going in terms of players. And maybe that's because the players aren't performing and stuff like that. But I don't know if you guys feel this, but I just feel like Franken does not know his best team. And he doesn't know his best team in terms of the balance of the team either. And I think that's the biggest thing at the moment.
Well, I think a draw was ultimately a fair result in this game, actually. I think there's no doubt about that. I think on the Buffaloes, I think we need to have a proper dissection of them, and maybe next week's the best time to kind of do that, where we can give it a little bit more space, where we can really pull apart, the guts of Ghent. I think there's quite a lot to really be said there about them. I mean, I think it's over 2 months now since their last away win. I think end of September, I think. It's just the inconsistency on so many different levels, not just even on the pitch. They've not won more than 2 games back to back domestically this season. I think 1 win in 7, I think, is it, in the league, something like that now. And I'd be really keen to have a proper dissection about what is going on there. I think Ben's right. I think Franken is under pressure now. I completely agree with that. I know the club have said, look, we're going to give him more time. He deserves more time. There's lots of issues that kind of mitigate things a little bit. But yeah, he's definitely under pressure because they're underperforming massively, I think. Don't think he's particularly happy with the way things are working at the moment, unsurprisingly. But yeah, I think we should come back to Ghent big time next week and talk about them in a lot more detail, because there's a lot to be said in them, I think.
And maybe, hopefully for them, we can also add some positives there as well. Then, after the upcoming crucial week, anyway, for all sides that are still in the cup, anyway, there would be some topics. Westerlo never seems to have a dull game. It's not completely true. They have had some stinkers as well, but they are quite good offensively. At least they're scoring quite some, and not only they actually still could be a lot more efficient and higher up as well. And on the other hand, they give away quite a lot, even with different goalkeepers. It's not always goalkeepers' faults either, but we've talked about that as well. But they do concede quite easily. In this game, it was actually more in offense. I guess they could have done more. Sayed Manesh got an assist and a goal, which arguably makes him man of the match. But I feel like he probably could have / should have done more. Even in the stats department, he did create a lot, so I'll give him that, of course. Nonetheless. Gent very narrowly holding on to the top 6 spot so far. Well, I hadn't looked that set up for Gent this time, but if indeed they only won two consecutive games, that explains who their joints top 6 and 7 at the moment with. So Union that just have matched that feat, but are more in an upwards trajectory, and while Gent seem to be spiraling down, well, not seem to be, they are at the moment. They will need to halt that sooner rather than later for themselves, obviously. Scott also already mentioned Norway wins since end of September. To be more precise, that was the 22nd of September. But I have to give them one positive then, I guess. That was a really nice first goal for Sonko. The finish was easy, of course, but the attack was really nice. It was really well-worked move, and good for him that he's off the mark finally as well. And hopefully he can get some confidence out of that to take into the next week and the rest of the season. Giving away the game there in the final minutes again. Yeah, yet another blow for Gent.
Yeah, I just quickly flicked the table to what it would look like in the last 5 matches, and they'd be 13th if we did it by the last 5. So that probably sums it up a little bit.
Plus, admittedly, sorry to jump in again, but admittedly, based on their expected goals and expected points, they are more or less, they're actually overperforming still, I believe, even. So that's very much worrying for them.
Massively. They should, if you put the table by XG, I think it is, there's expected points, they'd be 13th with 18 points. So it's quite wild, isn't it? But I mean, you say that they're looking like they'll slip out the top 6, but of course they'll not be in the top 6. They're going to finish 7th, they'll win playoff 2, and then they'll make Europe. I think we just need to kind of write this one down in the script book at the beginning of every season. Just feel like this is how it's going to pan out. I'm never going to predict them higher than 7th ever again. I think that's how it's going to pan.
They could also win the cup, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just quickly go through the cup fixtures before we get to the Challenger Pro League section, because I think Coleman and Muslic have made us ramble on a little bit longer than we usually ramble on for. But obviously, Patro against Club is tonight as of recording, so that game will be done by the time you listen to this. The other games might be done as well. I don't know when people listen to this. But Leuven, they host the only other second division, the only lowly side in Zulte Waregem on Wednesday evening. Union against Ghent, Genk versus Standard, Beerschot face Mechelen, Kortrijk against Antwerp, Cercle Bruges, they host St. Truden, and Anderlecht against Westerlo. Yeah, I'd prefer it when there's more lower division teams in there. Like the Oostend run last year, that was fun. That's what you want. So fingers crossed. Well, I don't know if we want Patro to keep going, because it's just going to be annoying if they keep turning all the heating on and stuff like that. But maybe Zulte Waregem can go on a little run. That'd be quite nice. Speaking of Zulte Waregem, let's get to a quick roundup of the second tier, where, again, I said at the beginning we could speak for a whole hour or an hour and a half about the Muslic and the Coleman thing. We could probably speak about a couple of the games that happened in the Challenger for a good 2 hours. There were some ridiculous matches this weekend, Scott, weren't there?
There was. And what a segue that was, by the way. No sooner has Zulte Waregem popped into your brain than we're dropping down to the CPL. Yeah, Matchday 13 this weekend. Young Genk 2, Zulte Waregem 3, Lommel and Lokeren finishing 1 apiece, Anderlecht Futures beating Liège 2-0 in Brussels, RFC Liège beating Deinze convincingly 3-0. More on them, of course, in a second. Beveren and Patro finishing goalless. Beveren struggling to break down Patro despite playing more than 60 minutes of that game, I think it was, against 10 men. I saw most of that game. Beveren played pretty well, but just couldn't get the goal. A mental game just outside Liège. Serang 4, Molenbeek 4. You got your money's worth if you were at that game, there's no doubt about it. Eupen 3, Ral 4, Ral absolutely storming it still, and Frank Moran 1, Club Next 2. So Zulte are top still, just on goal difference from Ral, who we're going to start talking more and more about, I think. I'm not sure this is a flash in the pan. They're doing really, really well. Jelle Vossen is still top scorer. He got another couple this weekend. Reasonably big bit of news today out of the Challenger Pro League. Deinze, who else? Everyone's talking about them, of course, still every day. They were deducted another 3 points today for failing to prove payments, of course, which we knew weren't coming for September and October, which they were due to prove. Failed to do that, so that's the second points deduction they've had in, well, the last couple of weeks or so now. They're now just teetering above the drop zone in the CPL, so it feels like, lots of things are falling apart both on and off the pitch for them, and I'm sure we will have more on them next week as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was just looking back to kind of see what the press releases have said, just to kind of see like what they thought was going to happen. And I think it was on the 22nd of November they were talking about within a week's time they'd have 75 million because they'd float AAD, whatever they're called. They'd get 75 million, 6 million into the club. Everyone's happy. They were like, just give us a bit more time. Just let us like cover us for 3 million or something and we'll sort it out. And it's just like, I've never... Could you imagine just going and like buying a house and then being like, do you mind, like, I'm going to buy this house, but I just need to go and like find some money from someone, but I'm going to live in it. I'm going to operate in it and stuff like that, but I'll find the money somewhere else. Like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Like, that's literally what they've done. Like, they've been like, because they don't have the money. Like, it's clear they don't have the money, but they're buying teams in France and Italy. And it's like, how mental is this that you literally, like, it feels like 777. Like on a much worse scale, doesn't it? Where they like suddenly realise they don't have any money. They somehow just like, it's just this weird, very weird thing about people being able to buy clubs without having the money, but saying they'll get the money. And it seems that Belgium's just allowed itself to be opened up to this far too often, far too often.
Yeah, do not get us started on these notorious letters of promise. We'll pay for it later, I promise. Let's not go there.
Yeah. There's an element of, like, you could say that like the league is also being unbalanced now as well anyway, no matter how it turns out for them. Even if miraculously they're saved this last few weeks, they've played against bottom sides as well. They're that whole relegation battle is completely skewed with everything that's going on there. And if they don't, even then, I guess you could say they potentially gave these teams they played against some confidence boost. But okay, I guess that's something that would happen. But not want to go too deep in it, but there's an element of that as well. Anyway, on sportive levels as well.
I reckon the league are just watching this, desperate for them to find this 75 million, aren't they? And just be like, just please, like, otherwise we've got to deal with like what happens to all the games you've played, all that sort of stuff. And like, oh, it's such a mess. And yeah, who knows? Maybe this week we'll be talking about the 75 million, the 3 clubs they've bought, and all that sort of stuff. But I somehow highly doubt it when they promised to pay the players within a week of starting, and then we're like, oh, we didn't realise there was that much debt. It's like, well, that's your own bad due diligence, and it's also bad that apparently the old owners didn't tell them that they had this much debt, which I struggled to find how that's possible. If I'm honest, like, it surely was common knowledge that there was this debt. But anyway, we'll talk about this more when it eventually ends in bankruptcy for Deinze, and the fans are eventually the ones that have to suffer. Which is, it's a farce and it's slightly comedic, but then at the end of the day, you also remember this is a club with fans, it's a club with kind of youth teams, it's a club with players, it's a club with staff that don't deserve to be going through this. So is very, very frustrating. But I think we finally got to the end of this episode, and congratulations if you're still listening. Thank you very much for sticking with us for the whole duration of this, guys. It's been a pleasure to be back together as a three.
It has. It's been absolutely delightful, and this week has given us so much news to talk about, which is good. So more again next week, and whatever you're up to over the next few days, look after yourself, and we'll be with you again very soon.
But Ben, are you actually tired of us? Because like you keep mentioning that it's been a very long episode, and it sounds like you don't want to do this anymore. Just tell us it's okay. It's not that long. But you can better moonwalk like Bertaccini after his first goal as well, so to celebrate.
We'll announce the termination of my contract by mutual consent at the end of this one. No, it's also that I'm stealing the baby's bedroom for this very time, and he's probably like, I want to go to bed. But my dad is sat there talking about Belgian football. That's probably in the back of his mind. But oh well, we got there in the end. The sacrifices he has to make for people to listen to the Belgian football podcast, I'm sure it's very much appreciated. If you do appreciate what we do and you like what we do, please do leave us a review on your podcast app of choice. You can also donate to us at the Buy Me a Coffee website, which all links are on our socials for that. But as always, thank you very much for listening to this episode, and we'll speak to you very soon on another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast.